It's outrageous and it's wrong. And they ought to stop it today. They have never moved a single job out of Washington. They've not lost a single job in Washington. Boeing wants to take their capital and set up shop in South Carolina, which the last time I checked was still one of the 50 states of the Union. And they're being told, no, you can't do it. You can't go. You can't build a factory and create jobs in South Carolina. Industrial policy in Solyndra. Right? Give $500,000 to a solar panel company that then goes bankrupt. It's work. I read this Saturday that program expired on Friday, just a few days ago. And right before it expired, they extended another $5 billion in loans to solar panel companies. Another $5 billion. Government's really great at picking winners and losers, aren't they? Yeah, especially with your money. Why don't we build that Keystone pipeline to take shale oil from Canada down to Cushing, Oklahoma? I mean, wouldn't it be good if we didn't buy petroleum from Saudi Arabia and generate petro-terrorism dollars? I mean, the last I heard, those Canadians were really thinking about joining Al-Qaeda, weren't they? Yeah, all those radical imams up in, I don't know, Alberta and Saskatchewan. We got to be careful of them. Buying oil from them would be a really wonderful idea, and it would create thousands and thousands of jobs. You want to know where the jobs are? They're sitting right there at that Keystone pipeline, and yet, won't do it. Why haven't we signed the trade pacts with Korea and Colombia and Panama? They're sitting there. And there could very well be balance of trade surpluses with those countries. And yet, they languish on the president's desk. I'm prepared to say that the president is disinterested in economic growth, and that's a terrible, terrible thing to say, because it's going to be very costly. I think the idea is to lock in government spending at 25% of GDP. That's there on the left-hand side. You can see how it's rocketed up. Okay, we all know fiscal policy says you're supposed to spend or you do something to stimulate the economy in a downturn. And we had a major downturn, no doubt about it. But I don't think the idea is to go back to where it was before this recession happened. I think the idea is to lock that in and then try to figure out later how to pay for it. And you're going to have a problem doing that. That's the history of tax rates since 1920. Notice in the 1950s, there it is, we had a top marginal tax rate of 91%. So think of it. Think of it. You work 60 hours a week, and for every dollar you make over a certain level, the government lets you keep 9 cents. Isn't that great? Make a buck, keep 9 cents. No thanks. Jack Kennedy came in and lowered the tax rate to 70, and then Ronald Reagan dropped it all the way to 28. Now it's at 35. Okay, they're talking about raising it some more. That's fine. Look, pick your favorite prime number and put the top marginal rate there. I don't care. You got to tell me what you're going to do with Hauser's Law. Hauser's Law is this inconvenient truth, pardon the expression, that no matter what the marginal tax rates are or were, move them all around, the best you get out of the economy is 20% of GDP in tax revenues. So as the economy has grown here on the horizontal axis, that's tax revenues on the vertical axis, and you seem to get 20% of the economy out, no matter what you do with marginal tax rates. So you want to finance government? That's great. I think you should. But you're going to have to come up with something other than just the income tax, because history shows you're not going to be able to balance the budget or even come close, because it's going to give you 20% of GDP. So this is the troubling part. Robert Lucas, who's a Nobel laureate, he asked the following question. Is it possible that by imitating European policies on labor markets, welfare, and taxes, the U.S. has chosen a new, lower GDP trend? If so, it may be that the weak recovery we have had so far is all the recovery we will get. And if that's true, you may want to fasten your seatbelt with these next graphs that I have to show you. So I want to ask the inconvenient question. Will your children have a better life than you? Because 1% of economic growth over a couple of generations means a lot in terms of your lifestyle and well-being. That's a graph all the way back to 1869, back when King Kong was just a little monkey, way back then. It shows per capita growth in GDP, and notice it has a trend line of 2.25%, and it always seems to come back to that. So in 2010, there was a per capita GDP of about $40,000. Okay. If instead, in 1975 or so, we would have went on a lower growth path, that would have then given us a $30,000 income instead of a $40,000 income in 2010. You do the math on this and back it out, that would have been a 1.32% rate of growth. So almost a whole percentage point would lower our standard of living by 25%. You don't think 1% growth rate in GDP matters? It matters a lot, especially when you take it over 50 years. Now the hard part. Our economy from 1980 to 2010 grew at 2.97%. The French, who seems to be what we're trying to emulate in the policies that we're pursuing, they grew at 2.7%. Now start us both at the same point. Here in 2010, GDP was 14.52 trillion. That blue one is a 2.97% growth path. That red one is a 2.07 growth path. In 50 years, which isn't all that long from now, in 2061, at our growth rate, we'd have a $62.76 trillion economy. If we grow like the French, 0.9% slower, the economy would be about $40 trillion. In other words, our economy would be 50% bigger at that moment in time than an economy that grew at the rate that the French did. How many entitlements that have been promised over the next 50 years are you going to pay for with an economy that's only 2/3 the size of what it could be at a 3% rate of growth? That ain't looking good. Economic growth and entitlement reform are the only two things now that matter macroeconomically. And 1% means a lot. So, I want to ask you all a question here now. Is this, a lot of people say that I look like Jack. Okay. Is this as good as it gets? Because, I don't know. What if our new long-run equilibrium is 7.5% unemployment? What if it is? And I submit to you, the further we move toward Europe, the more you better start liking that. And that's too bad. Anyway, that's what I have for that. So let me switch programs, and now my good friend Jim Butkowitz from the University of Delaware will be speaking.